Why did you want to see me at this hour? I was sleeping. And yet you're drinking already. Am I late to your intervention? Pinguisha, you mean? I already know they're doing a test launch next week. Oh, well, that's something you could have just shot me a text about. It's not like I need to be on board the thing. That tall woman over there? You replacing that kid with her? Because I think that's a great idea. She's a brick house. Psh, maybe she can babysit the brat. Hey, if you need extra space for training them, why don't all of you go over to the Mark II? Oh, but the DG system hasn't been completed. If you damage it, no micro machine repair. No way. I'm headed back to bed. I'll review this evening. See ya, Pen Pen. Hiya! Penguin Truth here, and it's once again Action Channel Month here on Otaku Evolution. Back in the late 90s and early aughts, there was no shortage of anime outlets on television if you lived in the US, with Toonami and Adult Swim on Cartoon Network, Tech TV/G4, and the Sci-Fi Channel. We all pretend Toonami was the only game in town, and maybe for people with only basic cable, that's true. But I recall sitting down to watch Macross Plus, Soul Bianca, Fists of the North Star, and Bubblegum Crisis on Encore's Action Channel as soon as digital cable kicked in at my house. To say that these were important years in my anime fandom is no exaggeration. It was transforming a passing interest into a full-blown obsession, for better or worse, and having an even newer place to watch anime that not a lot of people were talking about felt like unearthing a hidden treasure in the ocean's depths. The first DVD box set I ever owned was Blue Seed, a show I only saw because of the Action Channel. Nowadays, people are cutting the cable cord and streaming. Anime barely gets any ratings on American television anyway. Why would it when you can just go to Crunchyroll, Hulu, or if you're a terrible person ruining it for everyone else, High Dive? Maybe people's tastes are becoming more focused, because there was a lot of anime that we used to sit through because the TV lineup would play several. Would I be reminiscing about Vandread if that weren't true? Vandread is a 26-episode mecha anime by Gonzo, split into 2 seasons, but don't fret because I'll be covering both. The premise is, well, it's pretty much just a hodgepodge of other anime blended together. Set at some point in the future, mankind has colonized space, but men and women are literally from different planets now, segregated, producing with genetic altering. Our plucky hero is Hibiki Tokai, a laborer who helps build robot parts for the planet Tarok's forces. and he has a desire to take one of those giant robots out for a spin, infiltrating a battleship to nab one. He gets caught, though, getting in trouble, but things get more chaotic when a band of female pirates attack. The Tarok commander detaches the newer section of the ship from the older one, trapping Hibiki, this obnoxious douche, and his stoic Bishonen with the pirates, whose ship fuses with the remains. The ship is tossed far away from Tarok and the woman planet Majer, forcing the men and women to cooperate to get back while fighting off an alien force called the Harvesters. The Tarok mecha, the Vanguard, and the pirate mecha, the Dread units, also have the ability to fuse and become a Vandread to fight the new threat. The ship, which gets named the Nirvana, is captained by Magno Vivan. At her side is the vice captain, BC, whose calm and sharp demeanor commands as much respect as the captain's wiliness. There's the ladies in the weapons department that complement the mecha with all sorts of technical support, largely run by Gasconnu. There's the ship's own technical support, Parfait. There's the unhelpful medical support, Pyway, and the dread pilots, icy leader Maya, flashy and seductive Jura, and spunky and silly Dita. And they all come to want Hibiki in varying degrees. Fancy that. Standing in to do the real medical work is Duello, who was a medical student, and navigating by syncing up with the ship's controls is Bart.
Oh, don't look so shocked.
No, not that Bart. This Bart. There are also some other characters, like Barnett, Ezra, Pioro, Robot, Uton, and Misty Cornwell. The second season's wrench in the Hibiki-Dita romance, who is gratingly annoying and superfluous with no redeeming characteristics. The less said about her, the better. Point is, the Nirvana has a varied crew, as well as nameless extras nobody cares about, like any spacefaring show. One of the, shall we say, favorable aspects of the antagonist largely being faceless, seemingly unmanned ships, who just seek out to harvest our heroes for their organs, is because they're so inhuman, they really don't need characterization. Thus, more attention can be given to the crew of the Nirvana. It isn't until the finale that we actually get to see one of the Harvesters in the flesh, and that's the only one we ever really see. What we do discover about their ethos is that apparently they see all the space colonists as spare parts.
Attention, you have no reason to exist other than as parts to be used by us.
There's a startling revelation about the Harvesters, and it's difficult not to spoil it because it does take up a good portion of the tension and drama of the show, but I'm still going to stifle it the best I can so that you can be surprised if you watch it. The question is this even worth watching? Because frankly, while I don't feel like I wasted my time, I don't exactly recommend this series either. While the twist of men and women in the position of having lived their entire lives apart both physically and culturally is a sound and novel concept, I feel like the execution is fairly by the numbers. In other words, first girl who sees Hibiki gets the most attention and is clearly on track to win his affections from the very beginning. On the plus side, it's good to see that not all the ladies on board are foaming at the mouth to be with Hibiki. Even Jura's hunger is mostly a taboo curiosity, as she rarely strays from Barnett. Remember, these are people brought up in a very different society. That's another aspect of the show that has mixed execution. Because the people of Tarok and Majer have lived apart and are constantly at war with each other, there's so little knowledge of the other sex between your rank-and-file soldiers or citizens. Because of this and the replacement of male-female reproduction, romantic entanglements have been same-sex for generations, which is frankly pretty interesting as a subject. Can generations of same-sex affections be actually forced into a new norm? Is the show trying to make any kind of statement on sexuality? The show treats opposite-gender romance as this forbidden, even unnatural thing that only Misty seems to know different from. The very concept of male-female reproduction is entirely alien to most of these characters, so it's only natural for them to feel same-sex coupling is the right and proper way of doing things. But even so, Dita falls for Hibiki and vice versa. If sexuality is biological rather than learned, what does it say about the nature of relationships on the segregated planets, if anything? And does that genetic altering to create offspring include biologically changing people at birth to be attracted solely to the same sex? Frankly, one of the major failings of the show is that its gender politics are merely window dressing to a pretty basic plot about culture clash and cooperating with the enemy to defeat a common enemy. It's a lot of harem-esque nonsense with a bit of honestly pretty bland mecha action thrown in, and it's all pretty skin deep in the long run. Not that you never get to sympathize or enjoy these characters, some of them can be interesting studies, but a lot of this just screams of what your average person probably believes all anime is about. We never even learn why the two sexes started living on separate planets to start with. It really doesn't answer many questions at all. It only ends up leaving more of them, which I guess leaves you needing more, if not necessarily wanting more. By the way, for all its showcasing of same-sex couplings, the premise has it built in there that there would be no prominent male romantic couples. Funny that, isn't it? Just a bunch of busty lipstick lesbians strutting around. Although even with that, they're fairly chaste. It feels like the show is a little too skittish about its own main conceit, but maybe calling it a conceit is giving it more weight than it deserves. The closest we get to a same-sex male couple in the show is... I wonder if I should spoil it at all. Here we have another pretty big spoiler, and I've been so haphazard about letting big things slip for shows that require a big investment of time for a very long while. I guess there's no real way to just skirt around the issue, so I'm just gonna have to get creative and treat the issue with as much subtlety and maturity as I possibly can. I think we can all agree just how capable I am of that. Okay, low-hanging fruit. My point still stands. No real male same-sex couples. The show treats the same-sex romance more as an object of male titillation than anything else. But of course our hero sees the light of jamming his schlong in this firebox. So once the planet's populations are reunited, things can go back to normal with penises and vaginas. Vandread, you are so shallow. I may as well talk about the mecha action too while I'm at it, and the CG effects used. I feel like the CG works better on the very alien, inscrutable designs of the harvester ships and weapons, which we rarely see up close or for any long periods of time, rather than the crafts of our heroes, which just seems to stick out like a sore thumb. One of the downsides of no real characterization of the enemy is that because you don't really know them beyond they want to harvest people for parts, it can be difficult to find the combat exciting. Oftentimes I just wait for it to finish before they can get back to the story proper, almost like the action scenes are kind of filler. The Vandread and its different combinations could have been interesting if it didn't hurt to look at them, and I don't think there's even a single clear shot of the dreads throughout the whole run. Some of the effects they use for the beams and explosions can be interesting, and I love the way the Nirvana looks, but otherwise the action elements fall pretty flat. This show has a serious identity problem. As the main protagonist, Hibiki is at least somewhat colorful in his short-tempered stubbornness and near-boundless determination. He's not always the kindest guy, but you know his heart is in the right place, even if his head is up his ass.
Did all you ladies see that? Let's face it, you folks just can't get by without me.
Because of this, Dita's natural positivity and openness does help to balance their coupling, but I don't find them particularly compelling as a romance, except in service to simple plot points. You can see why they gravitate towards each other, but the show never really brings you to care much about it. I feel like Maya, with her distant, quiet desperation and serious-mindedness, complements the fiery Hibiki better. Sure got them titties, though.
What is this? I'm supposed to control all of this by myself?
Hey, stop spacing out and do something!
jeez, in case you forgot, I'm wounded!
I think that probably the most interesting character in the show, aside from Maya, or maybe BC, is Gasconyu. She's usually a non-combatant, so she mostly stays on the sidelines, but she's just the kind of world-weary but friendly and wise kind of character I like to see. She clearly looks like she could be good in a brawl, but she's dedicated her life to being what she calls a stagehand, and she's okay with her lot in life. She's never afraid to speak her mind, even if her opinion's unpopular, and her backstory has more punch in it than most of the series in the space of just a few minutes.
I didn't mean to be so tough on you all the time. I'll trust you with the rest. Gasco. Sister! 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 Sister!
I think even the fate of the weird clone people Hibiki comes to work with after fleeing the Nirvana for an episode, or the little sick girl Bart is desperate to protect, probably have more emotional gravity than most of the main plotline. Just scrambling to get home before the faceless organ harvesters gets a bit old after a while, especially since it's rare that there's any changes to the status quo from episode to episode. It's like Star Trek Voyager in that way. A few good individual plots and a sea of wasted opportunity. But at least Magno isn't a total hypocritical bitch like Janeway. Also, a spacefaring race segregated by sex, fighting in giant ships, and a theme of culture shock. Come on, tell me I'm not the only one seeing Super-Dimensional Fortress Macross here. I mean, the elements are used differently, but it's an amusing parallel. A loving tribute, perhaps? Or just a lack of originality? I know it seems like I'm endlessly bashing this series, and, well, I definitely don't love it. I see it as just another run-of-the-mill early-aughts mecha series that doesn't stand out from the pack in any way, except that I watched it on the Action Channel. But watch it I did, all the way through, because at the time, watching anime on television was too strong a novelty to shun. We're talking about a show that isn't even as good as Bubblegum Crisis Tokyo 2040, which I actually own. This is pretty much a, oh right, that was a thing, anime title. But somehow, I don't feel like I wasted my time revisiting it. Call it misplaced nostalgia or what have you, but I honestly enjoy a few things about this series, some of the characters and elements I previously mentioned. It kind of reminds me of another title I watched on the Action Channel, Soul Bianca. I mean the original Soul Bianca, where just the first episode was dubbed. I'd love to review it. Vandread is the epitome of your average anime, but you could still get a thrill or two from it and not resent its existence. That's kind of a backhanded compliment, though. Anyway, our next subject is shorter and better, and a return to something I covered earlier this year. An overzealous ragtag bunch driving heavy battle machines and causing tons of collateral damage, and our return to Newport City with New Dominion Tank Police. Until then, see ya!
Women are monsters, and men were once their plaything. They ate our forefathers' innards, sucking them dry of all life.
Bye-bye, so long, farewell. Bye-bye, so long. See you in September. See you when the summer's through. Will I see you in September?